Many metalheads have asked themselves the question, what makes Mysteriis Dom Sathanas one of the most evil, brutal, and dark albums in metal's history? And today we are diving into that question, so be sure to stick around until the end. Welcome back to the heaviest show in the universe. My name is Kane Irvine, and if you love in-depth metal album reviews, discussions, and theories about the GOAT, greatest music genre in the history of the universe, then go down below, sauce me one of these bad boys, smash that subscribe button so you never ever miss an episode. When we first listened to this album, we're greeted by one of the darkest and most hellish sounding pieces of music written to that point. That incredibly hollow delivery on the guitars blast you in the face as the drums truly create an evil sound, showing that Mayhem really wanted to get a certain vibe and feeling across on this album. And once those vocals kick in, we know that this isn't like the albums released in the scene prior by bands like Darkthrone or Emperor. This is truly some next level black metal. Something that black metal doesn't get enough credit for, in my opinion, is the groove that it brings to such evil and dark music. There's no other genre in metal that can combine something so benign and pleasant like rock and roll drum grooves with the darkness and evilness that black metal brings, and it's so underrated. And with the song Freezing Moon, the vocalist at the time of writing this song, Dead, wrote the lyrics to be so suffocating and depressing that the idea was to make the listener want to commit suicide. Dead was truly a scarred character, and his twisted thought patterns are what truly sowed the seeds of this album. This guy was the first to wear corpse paint because he wanted to look, well, dead. And the paint gave him that feeling, and not to mention he buried his stage clothes in the ground and dug them up before shows. Bandmates often said that he, quote, didn't see himself as human, he saw himself as a creature from another world. He said that he had many visions that his blood had frozen in his veins, that he was, well, dead. That's the reason that he took that name. He knew he would die. And of course, his history of self-mutilation on stage, and when we think about his infamous suicide, this man had issues that were way deeper than music, and it's what makes this album so intensely dark and influential. Because of his aforementioned suicide, Dead never actually got to record vocals on this album. He got many of the writing credits, rightfully so, but the actual vocal recording was done by Attila Shishar. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. And honestly, this might have been for the best, because when we listen to this album compared to their contemporaries at the time, the vocal delivery was so much different than the high-pitched shrieks that were commonplace within black metal. It's like a droning, sluggish, black metal opera. It's fucking intense. But of course, we can't talk about this album without mentioning that hollow and hellish guitar sound that was pioneered by Euronymous. Before this album, black metal was an odd mix of Bathory style riffing mixed with death metal scaling and phrasing that had the genre in a limbo-like void for most of its early years. As opposed to thrash or death metal, black metal took longer to develop a unique sound that was distinguished from its extreme metal cousins. What is often considered the first true black metal, 1992's A Blaze in the Northern Sky, is still, in Fenri's own words, an album that was rushed and had lots of death metal riffs played in a black metal style. But Euronymous was hard at work crafting what would become the signature sound of black metal guitar playing, even though Mayhem's first true album, this one, wasn't released until 1994. Euronymous was incredibly influential in the Norwegian black metal scene at the time, with his own record store and label producing and releasing both Burzum and Merciless's first albums, and of course Mayhem's 1987 EP Death Crush, which could be considered even more black metal than A Blaze in the Northern Sky. Without Euronymous, there really isn't a Norwegian black metal scene, because he was the figurehead connecting all of these black metal wizards together. All of these musicians would hang out in the basement of his record store, and they would connect together to create new music and share ideas and talk about what was going on in the scene at the time. And even before their first full-length release, their sporadic and controversial live shows really set the stage for what black metal would become in the late 80s and early 90s. And of course, Euronymous was definitely involved in at least a number of the church burnings that took place in those early 90s. I mean, the cover of this album was a picture of the church that he and Varg Vikernes planned to burn down together. Euronymous was like the black metal wizard ringleader, connecting many of the personalities and thought processes at the time in this scene. An album with such an aura of despair could only be crafted by individuals who were living this emotion out in the real world. This includes Varg Vikernes, whose controversial background with white power ties further pulls this album down into its own dark history. Likely the most famous black metal musician of all time, Varg Vikernes really made a name for himself on this album with his drudging bass tone after he took over for Necro Butcher in 1991, who left after Dead committed suicide. And what about Hellhammer on the drums, likely the most infamous black metal drummer of all time. Those pounding blast beats that sound like the screams of Satan himself backing these hollow guitar riffs came to epitomize black metal for the rest of the decade and even to this day. Apparently, Vikernes even borrowed Hellhammer's kit for some of his recordings with Burzum after this album. And furthermore, we can't discount the influence that Blackthorn from the band Thorns had on this album as well, allegedly contributing a few riffs, including the main riff from the Dark Past. For real, the Norwegian black metal scene at the time was just an incestuous amalgamation of angry musicians who just wanted to create the darkest, blackest music in the history of the universe. And this, of course, resulted in Varg Vikernes killing Euronymous outside of his apartment in Oslo in 1993, a few months before this album even came out. Of all of metal's most influential albums, I do not think that there is one that has a more dark, depressing, and despairing air about it. The suffocating, binding, hollow atmosphere of the album reflected the emotional world of the men who created it. There may indeed be darker and more evil albums in the black metal catalog, but none are as influential as this one. This isn't an easy album to listen to, and in fact, it wouldn't even be the album that you would recommend to a black metal newcomer despite its influence. But this album, with all its grim wizardry and brilliance, is likely the pinnacle of black metal's history, and it deserves its place among metal's most influential albums. Thank you so much for watching. I know black metal is a controversial topic, and true black metal fans are very protective of their music, so if I missed something, let me know down below. I'm always willing to learn more. Other than that, I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoyed it, don't forget to go down below and sauce me one of these bad boys. Smash that subscribe button for me, and we will see you next week on the heaviest show in the universe. Long live metal.